Empathy is a gift, a powerful tool we all can cultivate, but for the super empath, empathy goes beyond understanding. It's about feeling the emotional landscape of others, sometimes to the point where it becomes overwhelming. And then there's the narcissist, someone whose world revolves around their own ego, often to the detriment of others. Now, when these two forces collide, it can create an intense dynamic where the empath, despite their good intentions, ends up becoming a silent torturer for the narcissist. But how does that happen? At the core of the empath's being is an ability to see through the false bravado, the arrogance, and the inflated self-worth that narcissists project. An empath can feel what a narcissist is hiding: fear, insecurity, loneliness, and deep self-doubt. The narcissist, who thrives on control, praise, and validation, craves attention, but more importantly, they crave that sense of power and superiority. The empath doesn't need to confront or challenge them directly. Instead, the empath's true power lies in their subtle actions that leave the narcissist vulnerable and exposed. In this speech, we'll explore how the super empath, without ever raising their voice, can break down the narcissist's defense mechanisms and leave them to confront their own insecurities. It's not about revenge or manipulation. It's simply a product of the emotional awareness the empath carries. By denying the narcissist the constant validation they seek, by holding up a mirror to their fragile sense of self, the empath doesn't have to fight back. Instead, they teach the narcissist something deeper: the true cost of living in a world built on falsehoods and empty power. Let me share with you how this dynamic plays out and what we can learn from it. Empathy is more than just an emotional response. It's a deep, almost intuitive understanding of the human experience. When we speak of a super empath, we're talking about someone whose emotional intelligence is finely tuned, someone who can not only understand but feel the emotions of others with an extraordinary depth. This can be both a gift and a burden. For the super empath, it's not just about recognizing that someone is upset, or even about feeling sympathy. It's about feeling the exact emotional state of that person, as though it's their own. And this heightened sensitivity allows the empath to tap into something far more powerful: an ability to see beneath the surface of others, to read the emotions hidden beneath the actions. Now, let's focus on the narcissist for a moment. A narcissist presents themselves with a very specific mask. They are confident, self-assured, and often boastful about their accomplishments and abilities. But this is just that, a mask. Underneath it lies an individual who often struggles with deep insecurities, a fragile sense of self-worth, and an overwhelming fear of being exposed as less than perfect. To protect this delicate ego, they build walls of arrogance, superiority, and entitlement. Their entire existence revolves around projecting an image of invulnerability, all the while trying to convince themselves and others that they are flawless. This is where the super empath's true power lies. While most people might take the narcissist's words at face value, the empath is able to peel back the layers. The empath doesn't just hear the boasting, the self-praise, or the exaggerated stories of success. They feel the emptiness behind those words. They understand, on a deep emotional level, that the narcissist's bravado is a defense mechanism. It's not confidence, it's desperation. And for the empath, this isn't just a superficial observation. It's an emotional reality. They feel the loneliness, the fear, the insecurity that the narcissist works so hard to conceal. What's fascinating is that the empath doesn't need to say anything to expose these vulnerabilities. In fact, they rarely have to say anything at all. The empath's mere ability to see and understand the narcissist's true emotional landscape often creates a silent kind of discomfort in the narcissist. They are used to controlling the narrative, to being the center of attention, to being admired. But the empath, without a word, can stand in stark contrast to that. They don't need to challenge the narcissist directly. Instead, they simply see them for who they really are, and in doing so, they disrupt the narcissist's constructed reality. This disruption can be excruciating for a narcissist. They rely on being the focal point, the star of their own show. But when the empath recognizes their underlying fear and vulnerability, it forces the narcissist to confront an uncomfortable truth. The image they've built of themselves is fragile. And that, for the narcissist, is a terrifying realization. The empath doesn't need to expose this truth aggressively or in a dramatic fashion. It's the quiet recognition that causes the most discomfort. The narcissist can feel, often without understanding why, that they're no longer in control. They begin to wonder, how does this person see through me so effortlessly? It's a question that, for someone who is used to manipulating their own image, can be deeply unsettling. The beauty of the empath's strength is that it's subtle, almost imperceptible. The narcissist may never even realize what's happening, but they can feel the shift. The empath, by understanding the narcissist's pain, can distance themselves emotionally, refusing to feed into the narcissist's need for validation. When the narcissist senses this shift, they become confused. How do you respond to someone who doesn't play into your games? How do you react when someone isn't impressed by your need for attention, when they don't buy into the facade? This leaves the narcissist in a position where they begin to question themselves. They may try harder to gain the empath's approval, resorting to manipulation or even guilt, tripping, but the empath doesn't fall for it. The empath doesn't need to make grand statements or engage in confrontation. They simply are. They embody emotional clarity, and this clarity shakes the narcissist to their core. The narcissist's entire world is based on the belief that they control the narrative, that they can manipulate perceptions. But when they come face to face with someone who simply sees them for what they are, without judgment or malice, it becomes a mirror they cannot avoid. And that's where the power lies. The super empath doesn't need to do anything to torture the narcissist. All they need to do is remain emotionally present, aware, and unaffected by the narcissist's manipulative tactics. In the end, it's this quiet strength, this emotional awareness, that becomes the super empath's greatest weapon. It's not about taking down the narcissist or confronting them head-on. It's about holding up the mirror to their inflated sense of self and letting them see what they've been avoiding. And in that, the narcissist finds a level of discomfort that they can't escape. It's a dynamic that can feel like torture, but it's only torture if you're trying to maintain a false self. The narcissist's need for validation is perhaps one of the most powerful driving forces in their life. It's not just a desire for compliments or praise, it's a deep, almost insatiable need to be seen as exceptional, as superior to others. This need stems from a fragile core, one that is constantly at risk of being exposed. The narcissist's self-worth is built on the foundation of external validation, and without it, their entire sense of self can begin to unravel. For the narcissist, the world becomes a stage, and they are the lead actor, always seeking an audience, always searching for applause. But here's the catch, that validation is never enough. No matter how much praise, admiration, or attention the narcissist receives, it's never quite sufficient to fill the void inside them. The reason for this is simple. They are not seeking validation for who they truly are. They are seeking validation for the persona they have carefully crafted, the image they project to the world. The narcissist is like an actor who is always performing, desperate for the audience's approval, but never satisfied with the applause. They crave recognition, not for their genuine self, but for a version of themselves that they have constructed to hide their insecurities. This constant hunger for validation manifests in many ways. The narcissist might surround themselves with people who will worship them, people who will stroke their ego and reaffirm their sense of superiority. They often engage in self-promotion, boasting about their achievements and exaggerating their successes, all in an effort to gain the admiration they believe they deserve. The narcissist thrives on being the center of attention, on being the one everyone looks up to. When they receive this validation, it temporarily soothes their inner turmoil and reinforces the fragile image of themselves they've created. But here's where the problem lies. This validation is fleeting. It doesn't last. The moment the applause stops, the narcissist is back to square one, feeling empty again, searching for the next source of admiration. It's a cycle that can never be fully satisfied. The narcissist may even become addicted to the high of admiration, constantly seeking out new sources of attention, new ways to feed their ego. They may push boundaries, act provocatively, or manipulate those around them, all in the pursuit of the next fix of validation. And this is where the super empath enters the picture. The empath, by their very nature, doesn't play into the narcissist's need for constant praise. In fact, the empath's emotional awareness can sometimes make the narcissist feel invisible. While others may be caught up in the narcissist's performance, the empath can see through the facade. They don't get swept up in the narcissist's self-promotion. Instead, they see the person behind the mask, and they may even feel sorry for the insecurity they sense beneath the surface. The empath is not impressed by the narcissist's outward achievements because they understand that these external markers of success are not the whole story. This, of course, is where the tension arises. The narcissist is used to being the focal point, used to having others shower them with attention and admiration. But the empath doesn't provide that validation. The empath doesn't need to constantly reassure the narcissist that they are special or extraordinary. In fact, they may even withhold their validation, not out of malice, but simply because they understand that true validation comes from within, not from external sources. And when the narcissist senses that the empath isn't going to feed into their need for constant admiration, they begin to feel something they are not accustomed to: rejection. Now, this rejection isn't necessarily overt. The empath isn't actively rejecting the narcissist. They're simply not engaging with them in the way the narcissist expects. The empath doesn't provide the constant validation that others do. Instead, they offer something far more profound: emotional clarity. They can see through the narcissist's need for validation and recognize that it's not the narcissist's true self they are trying to validate, but the image they have created. The empath may not even vocalize this understanding, but the narcissist can feel it. And it's disorienting for them. For the narcissist, this emotional distance can be incredibly destabilizing. They are used to being in control, used to receiving the constant praise and attention they crave. But when the empath withholds that validation, the narcissist is forced to confront their own insecurity. They may begin to question why they are not receiving the attention they expect. Why doesn't the empath admire them? Why doesn't the empath fall for their charm? And this is where the emotional discomfort begins to set in. The narcissist's world, which has always revolved around external validation, starts to crumble. The super empath, by refusing to feed the narcissist's need for constant validation, doesn't just disrupt their sense of control. They expose the emptiness that lies beneath the narcissist's inflated self-image. The narcissist is no longer the center of attention. They no longer have the empath's admiration, and they begin to feel the weight of their own vulnerability. They may try harder, pushing for attention or engaging in manipulation, but the empath remains unmoved. And in this, the narcissist finds themselves in a place they cannot easily escape, a place of self-doubt and emotional discomfort. This denial of validation, this refusal to feed the narcissist's ego, is not about punishment. It's not about seeking revenge or trying to break the narcissist. It's simply a natural consequence of the empath's emotional awareness. The narcissist is left to face the reality that their self-worth cannot be built on external validation alone. And in that realization, the narcissist begins to feel the true cost of their need for constant admiration. It's in this emotional dissonance, this space where the narcissist's need for validation is unmet, that the true impact is felt. The narcissist begins to feel the emptiness that comes with living in a world where external validation is the only source of self-worth. There's something profoundly powerful about silence. It's often underestimated, but for the super empath, silence becomes an incredibly effective tool, one that disrupts the narcissist's sense of control in a way that no words can. When we think of conflict or tension, we often think of arguments, loud confrontations, or direct challenges. But for the empath, conflict is rarely about confrontation. It's about emotional presence and sometimes emotional absence. And in this absence, the narcissist feels a discomfort that they cannot easily escape. The narcissist thrives on attention. They feed off the energy of others, constantly seeking external validation to reinforce their sense of self. They want to be admired, to be the center of the conversation, to have all eyes on them. But when the empath refuses to participate in this dynamic, when the empath doesn't play into the narcissist's need for constant recognition, a subtle but powerful shift occurs. It's not a direct attack. The empath doesn't have to be confrontational or aggressive. They don't need to challenge the narcissist's authority or deflate their ego in any outwardly dramatic way. The empath's refusal to engage, to provide the validation the narcissist craves, is what unsettles the narcissist the most. This absence of validation is like a void in the narcissist's world. They are used to being the focal point of attention, so when the empath doesn't react to their self-promotion or doesn't seek to please them with admiration, it forces the narcissist to confront something they usually avoid, their own insecurities. They may begin to question themselves, wondering why they're not getting the attention they expect. It's this shift in focus that starts to unravel the carefully constructed image they've built. The narcissist begins to feel exposed, vulnerable even, in the presence of someone who refuses to feed into their egotistical need for constant recognition. This silence, this emotional absence, can be a form of torture for the narcissist, not because the empath is doing anything deliberately cruel, but because it leaves the narcissist with nowhere to turn. They cannot manipulate the empath in the way they manipulate others. They cannot control the empath's reactions, which creates a feeling of powerlessness in someone who is used to controlling every aspect of their environment. And in this powerlessness, the narcissist feels an emotional discomfort they can't easily escape. It's not about confrontation. It's about the subtle, almost invisible way that the empath withdraws from the game the narcissist is used to playing. The narcissist may try to provoke a reaction, of course. They might boast louder, try to one-up the empath, or make passive-aggressive comments designed to elicit a response. But when the empath remains unmoved, when they refuse to engage with the narcissist's need for attention, the narcissist is left in a state of confusion. They can't figure out why their usual tactics aren't working. They don't understand why they aren't getting the reaction they expect. This uncertainty, this feeling of being emotionally unseen, forces the narcissist to confront the very thing they've spent their life avoiding, the emptiness inside them that they try to fill with external validation. For the narcissist, attention is the currency of self-worth. When that currency is denied, they start to feel a deep sense of loss. This is where the empath's silent power comes into play. The empath doesn't need to say anything harsh or confrontational. They simply stop feeding into the narcissist's narrative. They stop playing the game, and in doing so, they remove the very thing the narcissist needs to maintain their illusion of superiority. The narcissist becomes aware, on some level, that their world is not as solid as it once seemed. They are left to question themselves, their motivations, and their worth, something they rarely do when they are basking in the glow of constant admiration. This creates a strange and powerful emotional discomfort. The narcissist is not used to being ignored or emotionally rejected. They are used to being adored and affirmed, but the empath doesn't fall for the narcissist's need for constant attention. The empath's refusal to validate the narcissist's false image is not an overt act of rebellion. It's simply an absence of the constant affirmation the narcissist craves. And it's this absence that begins to destabilize the narcissist's entire world. The empath's silence, in a way, mirrors the narcissist's own inner emptiness. The narcissist spends their life trying to fill that emptiness with external validation, but the empath doesn't give them that external validation. Instead, they hold up a mirror to the narcissist's inner world, showing them that no amount of external admiration will ever truly fill the void within. And this is where the real discomfort lies. It's not the lack of attention itself, It's the realization that their entire sense of self-worth has been built on something that is ultimately unsustainable. This silent torture, if you will, is not about causing harm or seeking revenge. It's about the empath's refusal to feed into the narcissist's illusion. By simply withholding the validation the narcissist seeks, the empath forces them to face the uncomfortable truth about their own fragility. It's in this space of silence, of emotional absence, that the narcissist begins to feel the true cost of living in a world where external validation is the only source of self-worth. And this is where the empath's power becomes clear. They don't need to fight or argue. They simply need to withhold the validation the narcissist so desperately seeks. The result is a shift in the dynamic, one that leaves the narcissist questioning their own worth and the authenticity of their carefully constructed image. Emotional awareness is one of the most powerful yet underappreciated tools in human interactions. For the super empath, it's not just a gift, it's a way of life. The empath doesn't just hear the words that are being spoken or notice the behaviors that are on display. They feel the emotions underneath them, the currents running beneath the surface of each conversation, each interaction. And this awareness creates an emotional landscape that the narcissist, for all their bluster and bravado, cannot escape. The narcissist operates in a world built on control, on the need to dominate conversations, relationships, and ultimately, people's perceptions of them. They craft and manipulate their image, making sure to maintain a sense of superiority at all costs. They seek to project confidence to show the world they are above others. This constant performance requires a great deal of energy, and most of all, it requires validation from the outside world. For the narcissist, their self-worth is often fragile, held together by the admiration of others. They must constantly maintain this illusion of strength, power, and invulnerability, because it's all they have to protect them from the emotional instability that lies beneath. But the empath sees through this. The empath doesn't just see the surface-level confidence or the inflated sense of superiority that the narcissist presents. Instead, they feel the underlying vulnerability, the fear of being exposed, the deep need for approval. The empath knows that the narcissist's outward bravado is merely a defense mechanism, a mask designed to hide the truth. And because the empath understands this on a profound emotional level, they don't engage with the narcissist in the same way others do. They don't buy into the false narrative the narcissist is presenting. This emotional awareness doesn't require confrontation or verbal confrontation. It doesn't require the empath to challenge the narcissist's behavior directly. In fact, the empath doesn't need to engage in the same power struggles the narcissist craves. The empath's awareness is enough to shift the dynamic. By simply understanding the narcissist's emotional needs, understanding the deep insecurities and fears behind their actions, the empath becomes a mirror to the narcissist's true self. This mirror is not one that reflects the idealized version of the narcissist. Instead, it reflects the vulnerable, insecure person hiding beneath the armor. And that mirror can be uncomfortable, even torturous, for someone whose entire identity is built on avoiding these truths. This is where the real power of emotional awareness comes into play. The narcissist seeks validation from others, but the empath, because they see through the narcissist's facade, refuses to provide that validation. The narcissist, who relies on the attention and admiration of others to maintain their sense of self-worth, becomes frustrated by the empath's emotional clarity. They are used to manipulating people's perceptions, to controlling how others see them, but the empath doesn't play that game. Instead, the empath's emotional awareness forces the narcissist to face themselves, without the distraction of constant praise, admiration, or validation. The narcissist can sense this shift. They can feel the empath's emotional clarity, even if it's not articulated. It's an intuitive feeling, a sense that they are being seen for who they truly are, not the grandiose image they've crafted, but the fragile, insecure person underneath. And this can be terrifying for the narcissist. It strips away the illusion they've built, leaving them exposed. They begin to realize that their control over others, their ability to manipulate perceptions, is ineffective against someone who can see beyond the surface. They may try to engage in more dramatic displays, trying to provoke a reaction from the empath, but these tactics often fail to get the response they're used to. The empath doesn't react to the narcissist's performance. Instead, they remain emotionally present, understanding, but not moved. This creates a deep discomfort for the narcissist because they are no longer in control. They no longer have the upper hand in the relationship. The empath's awareness has shifted the power dynamic, and the narcissist finds themselves in a position they are unfamiliar with, vulnerable, exposed, and uncertain. It's not about fighting the narcissist or challenging them directly. It's about remaining emotionally grounded and aware, refusing to engage in the narcissist's game of manipulation and validation. For the narcissist, this lack of emotional engagement is unsettling. They crave validation, but they don't get it from the empath. They attempt to manipulate, charm, or coerce the empath into reacting, but the empath remains unmoved, emotionally clear. This emotional clarity creates a subtle but undeniable tension. The narcissist, for all their strength and power, cannot break the empath's resolve. And in this, the narcissist is forced to face something they would rather avoid: the truth of their own vulnerabilities. The empath's emotional awareness is not about confrontation, it's about presence. The narcissist's manipulative tactics don't work on someone who can see through them, and this, in itself, becomes a form of emotional torture. The narcissist is left to question themselves, their motivations, and the very foundation of their identity. They can no longer hide behind their constructed image. The empath, by simply being emotionally aware, creates a space where the narcissist's insecurities are exposed, whether the narcissist wants to face them or not. The empath doesn't need to say anything harsh or attack the narcissist's character. Their mere understanding of the narcissist's emotional landscape is enough to disrupt the narcissist's carefully maintained image. This emotional awareness becomes the empath's greatest strength, one that the narcissist can't easily manipulate or escape. And it's in this awareness that the narcissist finds themselves in a position of discomfort and confusion, unable to control the narrative they've so carefully constructed. The empath's quiet, yet profound, understanding becomes the silent force that destabilizes the narcissist's world. One of the most subtle yet profoundly impactful ways the super empath engages with a narcissist is through the idea of non-judgment. The narcissist, despite their outward confidence and superior attitude, is often driven by an inner fear of being judged or criticized. They live in a world where their self-worth is largely determined by how others perceive them, and as a result, they are constantly on guard, always trying to protect their fragile image. They are deeply invested in maintaining a facade of strength and superiority, and any sign that this facade might crack, whether through criticism or rejection, can feel like a threat to their very identity. The empath, however, doesn't operate with judgment in the way others might. While many people would react to the narcissist's behavior with criticism, skepticism, or defensiveness, the empath chooses to see things differently. The empath understands that the narcissist's behavior isn't necessarily an accurate reflection of who they truly are, but rather a defense mechanism, a shield designed to protect their fragile self-esteem. The empath sees beyond the narcissist's arrogance and self-centeredness to the deep insecurity that lies beneath, and rather than condemn or criticize that insecurity, they simply accept it for what it is. They don't try to tear down the narcissist's persona. Instead, they choose to interact without judgment, without reacting to the narcissist's provocations in the way others might. This lack of judgment, though it may seem passive, is actually a potent force. It strips the narcissist of one of their most powerful weapons, the ability to provoke a defensive reaction. The narcissist is used to provoking others, using their arrogance or manipulative behavior to elicit emotional responses. They feed off the reactions of others, whether it's praise, admiration, or even anger. They need that external emotional feedback to maintain their sense of control. But the empath doesn't give them the reaction they're looking for. The empath doesn't respond to the narcissist's provocations with anger, frustration, or attempts to prove them wrong. Instead, they maintain a calm, non-judge, mental presence that leaves the narcissist in a state of confusion. It's this confusion that becomes a form of emotional torture for the narcissist. They rely so heavily on the reactions of others to reinforce their sense of self. But when they don't get the expected response from the empath, they are left questioning their own sense of power. They begin to wonder why the empath isn't reacting to their provocations, why their usual tactics aren't working. The narcissist is so accustomed to being able to manipulate and control the emotions of others that when they encounter someone who isn't easily swayed, it creates a profound sense of disorientation. This non-judge, mental approach also forces the narcissist to confront their own behaviors. The narcissist often operates under the assumption that they are entitled to special treatment, that others should cater to their needs and desires. They expect the world to revolve around them to acknowledge their superiority. But when the empath interacts without judgment, they offer the narcissist a mirror that shows them their behavior without the usual emotional drama. They don't fight back, they don't argue, and they don't give in to the narcissist's demands. Instead, they simply exist without reacting in the ways the narcissist expects. And this forces the narcissist to question whether their manipulative tactics are truly working, or if they are, in fact, having the opposite effect. By withholding judgment, the empath also provides a space for the narcissist to reflect on their own behavior. When someone isn't reacting emotionally, when someone isn't feeding into the narcissist's need for control, it becomes impossible for the narcissist to maintain their illusion of superiority. The narcissist may try to escalate the situation, pushing harder for attention or admiration, but the empath remains unmoved. It's not that the empath is being passive. They are being emotionally present, but they are not engaging with the narcissist's ego. And this emotional distance, this refusal to react with judgment or defensiveness, is what destabilizes the narcissist's carefully constructed world. The empath's non-judge, mental stance isn't about pretending the narcissist's behavior is acceptable. It's about seeing the narcissist's behavior for what it is, a defense mechanism, a coping strategy for deep-seated insecurities. The empath doesn't buy into the narcissist's false narrative of superiority, but they also don't attack the narcissist for it. They simply refuse to engage in the same emotional games that others might. This emotional detachment forces the narcissist to confront their own behavior in a way that is uncomfortable and often unsettling. It's important to note that this non-judge, mental approach doesn't mean the empath allows themselves to be mistreated. It simply means that they don't react to the narcissist's behavior in the way the narcissist expects. They don't fight, they don't argue, and they don't get emotionally tangled in the narcissist's drama. Instead, they maintain their emotional integrity and refuse to give the narcissist the validation they seek through conflict or emotional engagement. For the narcissist, this is a form of torture because they are used to controlling the emotions of others. They are used to manipulating people into reacting to their provocations, whether through praise, fear, or anger. But the empath refuses to be controlled in this way. They don't engage in the narcissist's manipulative games, and this creates a space where the narcissist is forced to face the emptiness they've been trying to fill with external validation. The narcissist no longer has the emotional reactions of others to prop up their sense of self-worth. They are left with only their own insecurities to confront, and this can be an incredibly uncomfortable and destabilizing experience. The empath's lack of judgment, therefore, becomes a powerful tool of transformation. It strips the narcissist of their power to manipulate and control, leaving them to face the truth of their own insecurities. And in this space, the narcissist is forced to reckon with the very behaviors they've been using to shield themselves from the vulnerability they fear. The final piece of this dynamic between the super empath and the narcissist is the notion of creating boundaries. It's an element that the narcissist often ignores or disregards, thinking that their needs and desires take precedence over anyone else's. They don't have the emotional tools to respect boundaries because their entire sense of self is built on the ability to manipulate and push others beyond their limits. The narcissist views relationships as transactional. What can others provide for them, and how can they extract that from people? They believe that the world revolves around them, and because of this, they rarely consider the emotional needs or personal boundaries of others. But the super empath, with their profound understanding of emotional needs, knows the importance of healthy boundaries. They understand that relationships cannot thrive on manipulation or imbalance. They must be built on mutual respect and clear emotional limits. The empath doesn't have to fight the narcissist in a traditional sense. Instead, they establish clear, firm boundaries that the narcissist cannot ignore, and in doing so, they effectively take away the narcissist's ability to control the relationship. This is where the power dynamics start to shift. The narcissist, who is so used to being the one in charge, now finds themselves facing an emotional boundary that they cannot cross. Establishing boundaries with a narcissist is not an easy task, as they are often skilled at pushing past people's limits, either knowingly or unknowingly. They can be charming, manipulative, and relentless, continuously testing the waters to see how much they can get away with. The empath's power lies in their ability to recognize these attempts and not allow them to succeed. The empath knows that in order to maintain their emotional well-being, they must set clear and consistent boundaries. These boundaries aren't negotiable, and they aren't flexible. They are firm because the empath understands that their own emotional health is just as important as the narcissist's. What's often surprising about this process is that when the empath sets these boundaries, they don't do it out of anger or resentment. They don't set boundaries with the intention to punish or retaliate. They simply do it because they understand that they are worthy of respect and emotional space just like anyone else. The narcissist may resist these boundaries at first. They may push back, test them, or attempt to manipulate the empath into ignoring them. But the empath, with their deep emotional intelligence, holds their ground. They don't bend or break because they know that by doing so, they would be compromising their own sense of self and their emotional well-being. For the narcissist, this is a huge shift. They are used to being the ones who set the terms of the relationship. They are used to having their needs prioritized, and they don't take kindly to having someone else assert their own needs. But the empath's ability to create and enforce boundaries forces the narcissist to reckon with the reality that not all relationships are based on what they can extract from others. The narcissist can't manipulate someone who is clear about their limits. They can't control someone who has the strength to say no when necessary, and this, in and of itself, becomes a form of emotional torture. The narcissist is not used to being denied or being told no. They are not accustomed to anyone standing in the way of their desires, and when the empath does this, it can feel like a rejection of everything the narcissist believes about themselves and the world around them. The power of setting boundaries isn't just about refusing to tolerate mistreatment. It's about showing the narcissist that their behavior won't be accepted in the same way anymore. The narcissist may try to push past these boundaries, but each time the empath reinforces them, the narcissist is faced with a stark reality. They cannot control or dominate this relationship the way they've dominated others. The empath's ability to say no without guilt, to maintain their own space and emotional integrity, is a powerful form of resistance. It forces the narcissist to confront their own behavior and question whether their usual methods of manipulation will continue to work. What's even more striking about this process is that the narcissist's response to boundaries often reveals their true nature. When faced with clear and firm limits, the narcissist may become enraged, defensive, or manipulative. They may try to guilt the empath into feeling sorry for them, or they may escalate their behavior in an attempt to break down the boundaries. But the empath remains unmoved. This steadfastness forces the narcissist to reckon with their own emotional immaturity. They can no longer play the same games they have been used to, and this forces them to either adapt or retreat. In many cases, the narcissist will retreat, not because they respect the empath's boundaries, but because they realize that continuing to push will no longer yield the results they want. This is where the emotional power of the empath becomes most evident. By simply asserting their right to have boundaries, the empath forces the narcissist to face the uncomfortable reality that they cannot control everyone around them. They cannot manipulate their way into other people's lives without consequence. For the narcissist, this realization can be torturous because it undermines the very foundation of their identity, control. They are used to making the rules, setting the terms, and receiving the rewards of their manipulation. But when the empath holds firm, the narcissist is confronted with their own limitations. They begin to question the effectiveness of their usual strategies, and in doing so, they are forced to reflect on their own behavior. Setting boundaries is not just about protecting oneself from a narcissist's toxicity. It's also about demonstrating that the empath is worthy of respect and emotional space. The narcissist may not like this, and they may resist it at first, but in the long run, the empath's ability to maintain boundaries serves as a quiet but powerful form of resistance. It's a form of emotional self-preservation that forces the narcissist to confront the limits of their power and the damage they cause when they try to push past others' emotional boundaries. And that is how the empath tortures the narcissist, not with loud confrontations or emotional outbursts, but with the quiet strength to say no and hold fast to their own emotional integrity.